If you want to make a quest book like the one you just saw, you can follow along this video. I tried to keep it as simple as possible so that it's as adaptable as it can be to everybody's projects. This video has two portions, the project setup and the coding. For the project setup, you can also follow along this list that I left for those that don't like to follow along with videos.
Add a canvas so your UI can show up. Set the canvas to scale with screen size with a common resolution so that it scales accordingly to different users' device. Add a child UI legacy button component to your canvas. This is the button that will open and close our quest book, so call it quest book button. Resize, position, and anchor the button. Delete the text component if you don't need it. Instead, I'll add a notification. So I'll go to UI, image, and rename the image to notification. Import what you want your notification to look like. Mine's an exclamation mark. I'll drag and drop what I want my notification to look like into the source image field of the image component. I'll add an audio source so the notification makes a noise whenever it appears. Import the sound you want the notification to make, then drag and drop it into the audio clip field of the audio source. Make sure play on awake is checked and loop is not. Then untick the check that's next to the game object's name so that it's not active when the game begins. When you press play, you'll see the canvas with only the button. Then, if we toggle the active state of the notification will become active. Add another child to your canvas. This time, it's just an image. This will be the actual page for our quests, so call it quest book. Resize it as you need and anchor it as you want. Add an audio source component so that it makes a noise when it becomes active. Import the sound of a page or a book opening up, and drag and drop that sound into the audio clip field of the audio source. As a child, add another image and call it text mask. This is going to be the place on the page in which our text will actually display. Anchor it accordingly, and then as a child to it, add a text box. Resize the text box to be the same width as the text mask. Any text that isn't within the confines of the text mask will be invisible in the game. Anchor it to the top of the text mask and set its pivot point to 1 and 1. This is an important step because if we don't do this, the default behavior would be to put the text in the center of its parent, which is the text mask. But we don't want it to be centered. We want the text to begin from the very top of the text mask and then go downwards. Make sure the text is the right size for your game. Then go back to the text mask and add a mask component. Also add a scroll rect component. Drag and drop the text into the content field, uncheck horizontal, set the mobility to clamped, and put inertia at 0.01. I'll set scroll sensitivity to 10, and we'll drag and drop the viewport or the text mask into the viewport field. Now we need to create a scroll bar. So right click, scroll down to UI, then scroll bar. Set it to bottom to top and its value at 1. Resize and position the scroll bar however you want. Then drag and drop the scroll bar into the vertical scroll bar field, setting visibility to auto hide. If I press play, you should see the page with the text box. And then if I go to the text box and copy paste some lengthy text there, then manually resize the text box, the scroll bar should automatically show up whenever the text escapes the confines of the text mask. The notification is still working, so all that's left to do is uncheck the quest book so that it's not active when the game begins.
So that's the project setup done. Now I'm going to show you the coding portion. First I'll explain my strategy and then I'll walk you through the coding.
We'll start by reserving a spot in the computer's memory to store all of our active quests. I'm going to call it Quest Library for now. Various events like collisions, the ends of cutscenes, or even simple clicks can add or remove quests from the quest library. When a new quest is added, I want the player to be notified through a visual and auditory notification. The player can then click on the quest book button to open it, and then click on it again to close it. The quest book should update itself to only display active quests that haven't been completed and show a default message if there are no active quests. As for the quest library, we can easily achieve this by declaring a list that we can add and remove quests from. The list will need to persist throughout the entirety of the game, so we'll place it in the script of a game object that will always be active and never get destroyed. Let's create such an object. I'm going to create a game object called main manager, which will be invisible in the game and is just a vessel to attach our list to. Right-click, create a script, name it main manager, add it to the main manager game object, open Visual Studio, erase the default start and update methods, and instead type in the following code. This code ensures there is only one instance of main manager throughout the game, preventing data loss during scene transitions. If you hit save and go back to your project, then press play, you'll see that the main manager game object has a section called Don't Destroy on Load. This means the object will move between scenes, never getting destroyed, and keep its data the same when transitioning from one scene to another. Now that the main manager setup is complete, let's declare our list. Add this line to the script, hit save, and upon pressing play and selecting the main manager, you will see the list in the inspector, currently with no items or quests. So that takes us to the second part of our strategy, adding quests to the list. We can achieve this by creating methods that, when called, will either add or remove a quest from the list. I want these methods to be callable under various circumstances, such as when two objects collide, upon clicking, or after a cutscene. Create a script called Quest Catalyst, open Visual Studio, and start by declaring a variable for the quest you want to add. By using serialize field, I'm making sure that we can type in the quest from inside the game engine instead of having to come to Visual Studio. Next, I'll create a reference to the notification, serializing it so that I can select it from inside the engine. And finally, I'm going to add a bool that will keep track of whether or not the quest has already been added to prevent it from getting added twice. Let's write the methods for adding the quest. We'll say if there's a quest to add and it hasn't been added yet, add it to the main manager's list. Also, since we're adding a quest, notify the user by setting the notification to active, but only if there's a notification to set active. Now I'll write another method called complete quest that will remove the quest from the list when it's called. Hit save and go into your Unity project. In this tutorial, I'll use an on-click event to call the methods we just wrote, but you can call them after other events too. So I'm going to create a game object called add task when clicked. Then I'm going to add a sprite renderer to it so I can see it in the game, a collider that I'll set to trigger so that it can detect clicks, and an event trigger because I don't want to use on mouse down, but you could completely do this all through scripting if you wanted to. Anyway, drag and drop the Quest Catalyst script onto the object. Since we serialized those fields, we can see them and set them from within the engine. So the quest that I'm going to add is simply you added a quest. I'll drag and drop the notification here so that the script knows what game object to make active. After it's been correctly set up, you can drag and drop the script into the onClick event, find the script's create quest method. So now whenever we click this object, it will create a quest. Oh, and for the event trigger to work, we're going to need to add a physics raycaster to an object in the scene. In my case, it's just the camera. Now duplicate that game object and rename it to delete tasks on click. Make it a different color so we can tell them apart. And instead of calling the create quest method, I'm going to call the complete quest method. Now something you need to know is that it's important that the task to be completed matches a task that's in the list. So make sure that you spell it exactly the same as the quest that's already in the list. Press play and you'll be able to see the list in the main manager. When I click add task when clicked, it shows a quest being added and the player gets notified. If you click on delete task on click, you can see the quest being removed. Now onto the final part of our strategy, displaying the quests in the quest book. For this, we'll create a script attached to the quest book button. We'll use a toggle to open and close the book with the same button, and a string builder to concatenate quest strings. We can also use an array for a set unchangeable number of default messages that will be randomly chosen as the default message when there are no active quests. Go to the quest book button and add a script to it. Open the script and erase the default start and update methods. And remember to add the header using Unity Engine UI because we're going to be referencing some UI components. Declare the variables we're about to use, which are a reference to the page, a reference to the text box that is going to have the quests written in it, a reference to the notification, an array for default messages, and a bool called openBook, which will work as our flag. We're going to serialize all the fields that we want to be able to set up from within the engine. Now I'm going to create a method called openQuestBook. In it, I'm going to change the openBook bool to the opposite of whatever it was. This method is going to toggle the openBook bool, so it will determine whether the quest book should be opened or closed. Create methods that will do different things depending on if the book is open or not. This method is going to be called createPage, and I'm going to tell it to check if we have a page and a notification to work with. If we do, check if the book should be open. If so, set the page active and turn off the notification. If the book is supposed to be closed, then set the page inactive. Now I can create the method to write out our requests. I'll tell it to check if there's a text box in our project. If there is, check if the list has any quests. If there are no quests, generate a random number between 0 and the length of the default messages array. Then print the array index to the text box. Now, if there are quests, create a new string builder and add all the quests together into one big string, separating each quest with a new line. Then we're going to feed that big string into the text box. Finally, we'll resize the text box by keeping its previous width, which is why during the project setup, we made the text box the same width as the mask. But we'll set its height to its preferred height, which is just the height at which all the text characters fit in the text box. Now scroll back up to openQuestBook method and add the other two methods. So when we call openQuestBook method, it's going to toggle the flag and move on to creating the page, using the toggle to determine whether it actually creates the page or not. Then it moves on to writing the quests. If we call it a second time, the toggle will flip openBook to false, moving on to creating the page, which will look at the toggle being false and thus close the page. It then moves on to writing the quests, but it doesn't really matter since the page won't be active to display them anyway. Hit save, go into your Unity project, find the questbook button, drag and drop all the references into the script. Questbook goes into quest page, text box goes into text box, and notification goes into notification. Type as many default messages as you want into the default message array. Then call the openQuestBook method when the button is clicked, press play, and it should all be working perfectly.
All I've done is replace some of the sprites with some stuff that I made really quickly in Photoshop and animated a few things, and this is what I got. I hope that this was able to help you, and let me know if there's anything that wasn't clear. This is the first tutorial I've ever made in my entire life, so I'd be really happy to answer any questions you have in the comments. Also, I'm pretty new to programming, so if there's anything that I could have done better, please just let me know. I'd love to improve. Okay, bye.